Hello, YouTube. Firstly, you're gonna have to forgive me because my editor's out of town, so you guys are stuck with me. Secondly, there's a big StarCraft 2 patch out, and I'm a pretty opinionated guy, and I got some thoughts. There's probably gonna be more than one change in these patch notes that I'm gonna have pretty positive thoughts on, but when you play them out in practice, they might not work out exactly the way that you want, or vice versa, where I think that maybe there's gonna be stuff that's gonna be kind of bad but in practice, it kind of works out to be okay. Thirdly and finally, though, it's very important that we finally address that the balance council is super dead. They don't exist anymore. The patch is being entirely designed and implemented by Blizzard themselves. I do believe that there's a group of pros that are, in fact, giving feedback, but they're not in charge. They don't have a final say, and they're not the ones making decisions. And I know this because of reasons. Blizzard coming back in and actually taking control of StarCraft 2 and reining everything in and actually managing the balances themselves is probably the biggest part of this patch, to be honest. Anyway, let's dive right in and take a look at the Zerg changes. So I'm going to put each change over top of my head. I'm not going to show the differences here. I'm trying to get this out as quickly as possible, but there is one clip I'm going to put in here where I show the difference between old Storm and new Storm. And yes, you did hear that correctly. There is going to be a new Storm. So let's start with the Spire cost. So right before I recorded this video, probably a couple hours ago now, I actually played a couple games, maybe more like a couple dozen games on the PTR, and I immediately played a Zerg who immediately built two base Muta, except when the two base Muta occurred, actually had a third base. So I was like mildly confused because I actually haven't played against Muta in forever, so this is probably why I got completely, sideswiped by it. I legitimately think that this is going to be a good change. It might be a little bit too good or maybe a little bit too underwhelming, but honestly, anything to take us back to the Lingbane Muta glory days, man. Like I miss those days at TVZ. So bringing HP back to Banelings, I think, is a solid change. I think the biggest difference that this is going to make, especially in the ZVT meta, is that it's going to give Zerg a much needed boost against 8 racks, without doing something to stop 8 racks from happening, because I think they're a fun way to play the game. And it also just improves their general survivability against Protoss as well. I don't know exactly with the new Storm what Protoss is supposed to do against Banelings, but I really would like to see a return to a swarmier version of Zerg. Zerg just kind of feels, a little underwhelming, especially because I've been playing more Protoss recently. Like I do feel like it's not the swarm you'd expect. It's a lot of slower, bulkier units. It just doesn't feel like the way you would expect Zerg to play. So going to swarmier stuff, back to Banelings with higher health, I feel like is a positive direction for the race. Okay, so holy crap. I still can't believe that there is a world where we may be playing StarCraft 2 with something that even remotely resembles Dark Swarm. Casting this bad boy now results in 50% less damage against ranged units. 50%. And in my opinion, this is a massive step in the right direction for Zerg overall as a race. I think this will result in less camping and just letting Zerg be a swarm in the late game. Instead of having to constantly run by, Zergs will be able to opt to take more fights and take less damage doing them. And it'll promote, longer siege tank lines that'll be able to do damage as Zerg comes towards you instead of kind of getting balled up and trying to fight around your PFs and whatnot. To be clear, though, I do not know if 50% is the right number here. It seems absolutely insane. So I'm sure if it's too insane, that it will probably get tuned. I just really like the ability and the idea of the ability rather than the number itself. But yeah, just to reiterate, I'm really just happy that, Zerg is going to be promoted to do more attacking and less counterattacking, more swarmy engagements on the ground as opposed to switching out to air-based tech. I think this is just a better way for Zerg overall. I think especially against Protoss too, where the late game can kind of get a little dicey. Yeah, I think Dark Swarm slash Microbial Shroud or whatever you want to call it is just a better direction. All right, now on to Protoss. So, having recently started playing some Protoss myself, I think the Energy Overcharge has three major issues, and those are Hallucinated Phoenixes completely ruin TvP. Second, having full energy oracles at the start of PvZ makes you nigh invincible. And three, that being able to spawn a High Templar with 2 storms immediately is absolutely insane. So this change over my head right here basically gives half as much energy per overcharge, but reduces the cooldown by 15 seconds. I think this is about a third less energy, not actually half, because you can overcharge more frequently, but I'm not 100% sure of the math. Now, in the PTR, when I was playing my games, I only got to play with it a little bit, but it looks like you're basically running without chrono boost if you choose to use Hallucinated Phoenix early on. So I think now the trade off is actually really, really strong. Like, you're not just going to be spamming Hallucinated Phoenixes because you're going to have to spend way more energy on Overcharge in order to get the same amount of vision that you would right now. I will point out though that I'm not really good with Protoss, so like my optimization is going to be nowhere near the level of top pros or whatever. So I actually don't know if that's completely true, or maybe it's even worse than I was experiencing because maybe I was like floating or taking my time and you'd miss it by even more. Not 100% sure. I didn't get a chance to play any PvZ, so I'm not 100% sure about the ramifications on the Oracle, but I do know that the Oracle just kind of holds everything. You build like 2 to 3 of them right now in the early game of PvZ, and you're just immune to basically everything. Um, and I think that's got to change. So this change kind of makes sense because it addresses both those things. And its effect on Storm is kind of irrelevant considering that they literally did just completely massacre our boy. But we'll get to that. So Mothership is getting a 50 HP, 50 shields nerf here, and I don't know, it's just kind of a bland change considering how ridiculous some of the other changes in this patch are. I think it makes sense considering that if they're going to keep the hero unit status and that you can't abduct it, that they've got to do something. But I'm a little concerned that we're getting away from the fantasy of like big ass ship, you know? Like, how far are we going to go, guys? 100, 100? 50, 50? Death by a single mutalisk? I think the new name for Storm is best expressed by this commenter here on Reddit. It should in fact be renamed to Psionic Drizzle. Here's a nice clip of me today experiencing the beauty and the awe and the glory of the brand new Storm. Oh, dude. Oh, no. Oh, no, brother. So what they've done here is actually increase the amount of time a storm lasts from 3 seconds to basically 9, but every tick of damage is cut in half. So it does the same amount of damage, it just takes 3 times as long. I will say that I generally like the idea of trying to separate the High Templar more from the Disruptor and the Colossus in role. I like the idea that we're going to take the High Templar and say basically this unit now dictates like you don't go over there basically for 9 seconds. That area is completely off limits, which is a lot longer than 3 seconds. It feels very zony and not so much of like an instant all your crap dies now. I feel like this is one of those rare changes that actually is really nice for the lower level players. You get a lot of complaints in Twitch chat and on the internet and in YouTube comments and in your Twitter feed and in your dreams that Storm kills a lot of stuff and it's been this way for like 15 years. So I think this is one of those things where kind of redistributing the damage over a longer period of time is going to be nice for them. The problem is that with these numbers, it's absolutely terrible. Like, a medevac out DPS's the Storm, which is just absolutely insane. I'm super confident the numbers change here, so I gotta say that I like the direction. It's an interesting change, but gotta tweak them numbers a little bit. So this is the DT. Nice little change, I guess. So when you blink your Dark Templar, there's a little bit of buffer time before you can attack, and now there's a lot less buffer time, I guess. It's okay. I mean, compared to everything else here, it's just like it's a nice little thing. All right. The Observer changes. Now, this is one Protosses are going to hate, and I absolutely had an evil cackle reading this for the first time. As a player who has to send out each one of his Marines down every path, and every time one dies, because you can see him and he's standing right in the middle of the lane, you know, I have to send another one to replace him. Finding out that observers will be revealed when they siege made me just the happiest guy, okay? Every game, I accidentally F2 and I lose all my scouting on the map, and Protosses have an invisible version of that that just gets to sit there and chill. And infuriates me. Now, I do think that the range increase is perfectly warranted. I think specifically this was done for like versus lurker engagements. I would have to ask the Blizzard intern guy who's actually running everything because I don't know what the reason is, but I think if you were to put this in like dead space around your base, you're gonna see like much further now. So I'm imagining like you're looking for medevacs in a spot the unit's unlikely to die, even if it's seen, is probably what I think the idea is there. You're just getting extra range for that, which I think is a valid trade-off, to be honest. I put this in my notes, but the changes to the obs are based and warranted. All right. The siege tank can no longer be abducted. Now, this is the change that I was, in fact, the most excited for, but I've actually seen the most division on it, both from my community and just on the net in general. A lot of the people I've spoken to already think it's going to be meaningless, but I think it's going to fundamentally change the way that TVZ is played in both the mid late game and the late game. In my mind, it's the tank line kind of died as a concept in TVZ because whenever you set up a long tank line, let's say you're sieging up against a hatchery, the first three tanks or something that are going to be able to actually shell away at the hatchery or hit in the surrounding area. But with the Viper, the Zerg just yoinks those three tanks, and now you've completely lost your pressure. So it just buys a hell of a lot of time for the Zerg to be able to get good position, and they can just stall almost indefinitely with those Vipers. And what this ended up doing is forcing you to have a much tighter clump of tanks because then abduct isn't as useful and you can keep pressuring on to an objective. The issue with that is that the Viper also has a spell to deal with that, which is Blinding Cloud. And I think when you combine the fact that tanks can no longer be abducted with the new Microbial shroud changes, I'm really hoping that this is going to return the mid late game of TVZ to be a lot more action packed and just kind of more fight based, where Terrans can take positions that aren't necessarily stuck behind PFs, and Zergs can be confident in actually taking fights in the middle of the map. And I don't really know about the numbers necessarily, and I'm a little concerned about the state of the ghosts and how that plays out, because I think that without you kind of might have to change or tweak that, because now sitting behind your walls are a little bit worse, and the ghost has had a supply nerf. But I think this general direction where we're kind of make the Zerg army a little bit better, a little bit more swarmy, take a little bit less damage when you use your spells correctly, and have Terran have these much better siege lines that are way more resistant to being dislodged, and you have to actually take the fights better. I think that's just going to make for a much better spectator experience and a much better playing experience. I could be wrong though, and I certainly know a couple people who disagree. So let me know in the comments below if you think that this change is actually going to make a big difference. Okay, so this is the change I'm absolutely the most concerned about. The Viking, which is now cheaper, down from 150.75 to 125.50, is already absolutely insane in the TVT matchup. And I would say that a lot of TVT actually revolves around your usage of the Viking and the Viking's existence. And I think making it even cheaper just risk the matchup just devolving into pure Viking spam. And it's kind of been this way ever since the Viking got anti mechanical damage on it way back. I don't even remember when that patch happened anymore. Now, I did argue with Coach Special a little bit, Coach Juanito, and he said that he only thinks this is going to be a problem maybe in TVT for 2 starport all-ins, mainly because, aside from the 2 starport all-in, it's not really going to be, the Viking won't be better than 3 Raven openers, and it won't be better than just playing Marine Tank. But late game, when you finally have enough money to build Vikings, is it really going to change anything? I don't know. I just get the sneaking suspicion personally that you're just going to see a lot more Vikings built, maybe with more ports. I'm not 100% sure, but it's just it risks something, in my opinion, that I think is a little frightening. I'm both scared and here for it. All right, Widowmine Burrow from 1.07 to 0.71 seconds. Now, the language isn't super clear here. Drilling Claw's effectiveness increased from 1.07 to 0.71, but my understanding is that all this means is that they're going to burrow faster, which is sick, I guess. You don't get the cloak like before, and now they're quicker burrowers, but I think that's actually pretty good because people complain a lot about the cloak factor of the Widowmine, but not so much about the burrow speed. And I think that this is going to prevent them from becoming super annoying like they were before and getting a lot of complaints about mines blowing up mineral lines, but will increase their viability and versatility in both PvT and in ZVT. So personally, I like this change, but I didn't get a chance to build them yet. I was too busy trying to build tanks against Neuro when I played him. But I'm really thinking that they might be pretty good TVZ again. All right, Hyperflight Rotors is down from 100 seconds research time to 79 seconds research time. And I've always been a little afraid that people are going to figure out exactly how annoying Speed Banshees are. It's going to make TVT a little bit ridiculous. But we're just one step closer to it being standard to build the invisible Sonic the Hedgehog. All right, on screen are the following 3 changes. We have an issue fixed with the Cyclone attack upgrade, giving it +1 instead of +2. Fixed an issue with the Mothership at a max attack range, which I don't even know what that looks like. And fixed an issue with Cyclone lock-on cooldown, which has been in this game for, I think, a year, and has been the subject of many balance complaints. If I had my editor, they'd all pop up on screen, but I don't. The editor is me. Sucks. Yeah. But those are all going to get fixed too. All right. In conclusion, I like this patch. I like it a lot. Now, I think the numbers, they're probably off, especially for Storm and Microbial Shroud, and probably off by a significant margin. I think generally this patch moves us in a solid direction, but I think that there's going to be quite a few revisions before we see an actual release happen. But I think most importantly, the fact that this patch exists is important. And I think the fact that it's being done by Blizzard themselves is extremely important. Okay, that's probably the biggest takeaway from this whole thing. And I hope you guys are glad about that, and as glad as I am about that. And if you're not glad about that, tell me in the comments, because it's good for the algorithm. All right. I hope this wasn't edited like crap. Love you all.